For this assignment, prior knowledge interview, we had to interview two children from grades 6 to 12. I interviewed actually two different kids from different sides of the spectrum. The first kid I interviewed was one of my wrestlers. He's from Southwest Virginia. He's a senior in high school. He's an athlete and he has aspirations for college. He's a pretty smart kid. He's pretty funny as well too. My next child I interviewed, she is from Northern Virginia. She is a 6th grader. She does a lot of different activities and clubs, just like what a lot of 6th graders do. And she's a pretty smart girl as well too. Basically, I got, a male, a female, a 6th grader, a 12th grader from the northern part of Virginia and from the southwest part of Virginia. So, I feel like I did a good job with the different kids I picked because they were totally different. The first part of the activity that we did was a photograph activity. Basically, we had 10 different pictures with 5 different NCSS themes. And the kids had to first put the photos in a timeline from oldest to youngest, or oldest to newest, and then they had to talk about it, like what was going on in the picture, what's the context going on in the picture, do you have any background information about the picture, like do you know anything about the picture, and what would life be like if you lived in that time and differently from now. Overall, I thought this activity wasn't that hard in my point of view, but the children thought it was really hard, which I was surprised with. The pictures I chose, I thought they were great, to be honest with you. They were from different time periods, different cultures. They had minorities, they had women, black and white, color. They had a lot of different types of pictures, so I think I did a great job choosing pictures. But the kids had difficulty looking at the timeline, and later on I'll explain some things I learned from the photo activity. After they did the timeline, we asked, at least I asked, which picture was their favorite and why, or the most interesting and why, and then I asked them again, what would life be different using this picture from now. Then we moved on to an interview activity, and in the interview activity you asked questions ranging from history, political science, geography, and key events such as the Civil War. And during the Civil War question, it was like, hey, when did it happen? Why did it happen? What happened afterwards? What sides were there? And it was Civil War, World War I, World War II, Great Depression. So kind of diving into major themes in American history. Overall, there was 4 things that I found out during this interview that I'm going to bring to teaching. First off, at any grade level in secondary, kids are still lacking basic skills and basic terms in social studies. That was my one biggest surprise. I had one guy that did not know anything about women history, and I'll verge on that later in this webcast. I had people just didn't know things that I was surprised they didn't know. And is it lack of teaching? Is it lack of education? Or is it just teaching the standards and you can't dive into more important stuff? I don't know. That's something that I'll figure out when I start teaching. But some of the stuff they just didn't know, and I was surprised, for how worldly we got to be nowadays and how culturally aware we have to be nowadays. These 2 kids were lacking that, which surprised me. 3 big things that we found out about the interview. First, all these kids had such an American-centered point of view. All their important figures, important documents, important events, all came from America. Second, women history seemed like it was forgotten. My male interviewee could not name one important woman in history. My female interviewee could name 2. Her answer was just okay, to be honest with you. I don't think they were the most significant women ever. But she only could 2 or 3. That really surprised me as well, too. And lastly, this is a big theme that I want to go on, is these kids could not critically think at all. To go on the first one again, teaching from an American point of view. I can understand why America has education. It's to glorify America. If it comes down to the nitty-gritty, is to make Americans better citizens and propaganda, blah, 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 blah. But nowadays, we got to focus on teaching kids to be more worldly and more culturally aware. And how do you do that? Well, when you look at certain events, American, world history, doesn't matter. You got to put different viewpoints in, such as you can do the Revolutionary War, okay? The American viewpoint, the British viewpoint, Venn diagram, boom. Okay, look at this nowadays, okay? You got the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War. Why Why do we want to go in this war? This is the viewpoint of us. The other viewpoint we got to focus on is, why do the Iraqis and Afghanistans want us out of their country, and why do they not want to fight the war anymore? You look at those 2 points, again, Venn diagram, you look at everything, you understand different viewpoints. That's how you teach it. And that's what I plan on doing, is looking at different events, different issues, and have multiple viewpoints. Because the more viewpoints you show, the better understanding your students will have. Second thing, women history. Be honest with you, when I was in high school, I didn't know a lot about women's history. To be honest with you right now, I don't know a lot about women's history. I got to really dive in deep and start reading books so I can be more knowledgeable to teach my students. How do you do this as a teacher to make your students understand more about women's history? 2 things. Every time you go over an important topic or important era in history, you got to pull women into it. You got to make it interesting. You got to make it engaging to students. Revolutionary War. What were the women thinking? What were they doing? Were they scared? Were they happy? What emotions were they feeling? Make the figures real. Use sources that are interesting. Find cultural references that are interesting. If the Simpsons have a cool thing, put the Simpsons on. If Family Guys have a cool thing, put Family Guy on. You got to find ways to make people remember and make it stick in their head. Last thing, critical thinking. The most important thing that I'm going to have to be able to teach is critical thinking, because it's important for social studies, history, but most important, life. To move away from the interview, when I did my student internships, the kids were not critically thinking. They were looking for me for the answer. They would raise their hand and be like, "Oh, Mr. Grenups, I don't know this." And you're like, well, think. Look at the question, break the question down, look in the book, look in your past papers, break down the question. Go back to the interview with the timeline. The major thing that kids relied on, at least my kids relied on, to put in the timeline in the events of oldest and newest, was the color of the picture. And yes, that does make sense, and I can understand that. But that's not the only way to look at a timeline. You gotta look at clues, look at cues. That's how you do it. And I had one picture. I know this is me, but I had one picture of the cotton gin. That was color. So it was 1820s I wanted them to look at. They all thought it was modern day because of the color. I know that's mean, but I just wanted to prove a point. Okay. And also during the interview, a lot of people, at least my kids, were like, "I don't know. I'm not sure." And they never went on a limb and tried to figure it out on their own. They just looked at me and kind of used me to figure out if they were right or wrong. So how do you do this in your classroom? You can't, bottom line is, you can't just use a textbook. You can't just rely on the textbook. You got to look at, different activities, such as exploration and discovery, which is in one of the textbooks that actually I used for this paper. Basically what you do is you just got to have the kids learn on their own. Web quests, awesome. Web activities, awesome. Use movies, media clips, sound clips, whatever. Bring in different sources, different documents, have group work, make it more engaging, more exciting, and the kids will critically think. So again, 4 things I learned. Number 1 thing, kids are lacking basic skills of social studies. Lacking. 3 sub-things I learned. We're teaching an American point of view, which is maybe okay 10 years ago when America was number 1, but overall, America's not going to be number 1 anymore. We're going to, as you know what's going on in the world, we're becoming like everyone else. So we got to teach different stuff culturally so kids are more aware and we don't look ignorant. Second thing, got to teach more about women history, and I guess you can go along more about minority history. Last thing, critical thinking is so clutch. You got to focus on it, you got to implement it, and that's got to be the key, because without critical thinking, first off, kids can't survive in the world. More importantly for us, social studies were extremely boring as well too. So, critical thinking, key. Thank you for watching this. Have a good day.